now, Mary McCormick has something to say.
So I know that not everybody comes to lunch knowing what to expect in the program, but if you had a chance to look at any of the photos that were rotating before lunch, you're going to know that it's a pretty special program, that it features 3 pretty special guys who took a remarkable journey this summer. One of those guys is my son, Charlie, and so a lot of you have been hearing a little bit about this over the last few months and holding my hand from time to time. And he's here with his travel companions, Ben Seelig and Henry Sanders. And given my close personal connection to the story, Harry Drake inspired me to at least offer a few moments of parental observation. You can see that the rally is really billed as motoring stupidity on a global scale. And this really included, and they'll tell you about this, but taking an old beater car from Great Britain, across Europe and Turkey and Central Asia and through 5 of the stands, and then across Mongolia and up into Siberia and back across Russia and into Estonia. So it's every parent's dream, I'm sure that, that you would agree. So, when the guys first mentioned this, I just thought, I'm just going to hold my breath and just assume that it won't come to be. But instead, these 3 guys really soldiered on, and they saved their money, and they made their plans, and they really made it happen. They left around the 1st of July and returned just a few weeks ago. They survived. And while there were many moments of worry and prayer that some of you shared with me, the parents here, we're all very proud of them and very glad to have them back. You are going to hear a lot of stories, but I have one favorite one, which I'm going to share, which is that Charlie called to me about a month ago, and he said, he was in Moscow, and he said, we're getting near the end of the trip, and I need to make a plan to get back to Milwaukee. And so I, of course, was eager to assist with that. And I called the travel agent the next day, and we, had a ticket, but I didn't want to buy it without confirming it. And so I couldn't get a hold of Charlie. We primarily communicated via WhatsApp. And so, he's in Moscow, and it's late afternoon here. And finally, I get a message back, and it says, "Mom, I'm on a date. I'll talk to you tomorrow." All right, and so this is kind of a generational observation, which is that Charlie got home, and I'm like, well, so how did you meet women on this trip? He looked at me and he said, "Mom, Tinder." Everybody all over the world has Tinder. And after all, Mom, they really just want to talk to a nice guy and practice their English. So anyway, that's my favorite story of this trip. And right now I'm going to introduce Richie Burke, who is the founder and president of GGM Marketing and the host of the Go-Getters podcast, who will conduct an interview with Henry, Ben, and Charlie. So why don't you all come up, guys?
Mary, if I knew about Charlie's Tinder success, my agenda would be a lot different for the rundown today. But we'll talk more about the rally itself. I thought Mary did a very good job at describing it, but I was watching a YouTube video last night, and if anyone needs a simpler description, it broke it down into 3 steps of round up some teammates, buy a beater car, and drive it 10,000 miles to Mongolia. So. Quite the thing to do. Mary invited all of us to Good City last week, so I got to have a beer with these 3 guys, and I didn't do any research on the event beforehand. And if you look at them, they look like 3 pretty average, normal guys over there, but I quickly realized these were 3 of the craziest and bravest people that I've talked to in quite some time. So looking forward to diving in today, and just to go down the line and introduce them in the sweater right here. We have Ben Seelig in the middle, Charlie Hawks, Mary's son, and at the far end over there, Henry Sanders. So Thank you guys for coming in today. Thank you for inviting us. Yes. All right, so first question. Who thought this was a good idea? How'd you guys know each other, get together, and do this?
So we initially heard about the Mongol Rally through a friend of Ben and I in college about 4 years ago. And the second we heard it described, we decided we're going to do that someday. Let's just bookmark it, keep it in memory for the future. And as it got closer, we talked more and more about it, and it kind of became more and more serious. And then I actually invited Charlie and told him about it. He was like, absolutely, let's do it, I'm down. And then he forgot about it. And me and
first
Ben,
roadblock.
me and Ben were planning. Eventually, I called Charlie and I was like, "Are we getting ready for the rally?" And this was about 1.5 years ago. And he said, "What's that?" And he just, so I re-invited him again, and he still thought it was a great idea. And he joined the team.
So you guys got together. You grew up together, right? That's all. You all know each other.
Yeah, all grew up in Shorewood, same square mile.
Nice.
Went to high school together, middle school.
Tell me about the start of the trip.
So we arrived in England, at least Ben and I, on July 1st. And we kind of got ourselves situated, traveled around a little bit, picked up the car, and Henry ended up meeting us in Bristol about a week later. Unfortunately, when Henry arrived, we had already run into our first big car trouble.
But I already broke it.
And our gearbox was not working anymore. Our fifth gear kept on popping out. And so after some time trying to figure it out, we found another gearbox on eBay. So we drove up 3 hours north and went to this garage and had our gearbox replaced, only to figure out that it was actually in worse shape than the one that we already had. It sounded like there was gravel rolling around in our gearbox. And so at this point, we were pretty skeptical whether we would make it to the starting line in Prague. But the gearbox lasted us the whole trip, so worked out pretty well.
And Charlie, just to clarify, so to participate in the Mongol Rally, you need to have a car that is, what are the guidelines and restrictions on that?
The only guideline now really is the engine has to be under 1.2 liters. I think that's the only real parameter now.
So not many cars that you can find in America actually qualify. It has to be really small. The clearance is really low because it's a really small car. And so a lot of the roads you're driving on going through Central Asia, the potholes are twice as deep as the clearance you have in your car. So you're going to be hitting bottom a lot.
And I mean, you guys aren't that small either. What was it like just being crammed in that car for few months?
Luckily for all of us, Charlie just really enjoyed the back seat. He had a station there, as he would call it. Everything was all in order, and so we just had our set seats, and Henry and I both have much longer legs, so it was ideal for all of us. I think we all loved it in there.
Great.
Every single bump, Charlie's head hit the ceiling of the car. Every single one.
So kind of early on in the trip, you guys took a ferry from, is it Azerbaijan?
Azerbaijan
To Turkmenistan. Tell me about that and what the experience in Turkmenistan was like.
So the ferry started off arriving at this parking lot area and hunting around for a ticket office. And eventually we found the ticket office and talked to the people inside, and they told us to come back in 2 hours and they'll have someone who can speak English and help us out. So we arrived back 2 hours later and we were told again, come back in 2 more hours. We'll have someone who can come figure this out for you. We arrived back 2 hours later and the ticket office was closed. So we camped for the night in the parking lot. Mind you, Azerbaijan is the middle of the desert, so it reached temperatures about 43 degrees Celsius during the day, which would be translate into about 113 degrees Fahrenheit. So we kind of, would hang out in the shade and, keep on going to the ticket offices. And eventually, about midnight the next day, we were given tickets and told that in a few hours the boat will be leaving. About 1 o'clock on the next day, we started getting into the boat. So it was quite an experience just to get into the boat.
I broke out into a full body rash right before we boarded it. That was a pretty exciting little prep moment. There was going to be no sort of medical attention I could have gotten for about the next 5 days. It was pretty good. Charlie looked at me and said, "I hope you don't go into anaphylactic shock."
We were also the only passenger car on the ferry. There was us and about 38 truckers. And so it was an interesting experience being with all these different, mostly Turkish truckers on a boat going across the Caspian Sea. Luckily, they were very nice fellows and treated us very kindly. They would come and wake us up in the morning and tell us that breakfast is ready. And for the next 2 days, would kind of love to talk to us, and at least to the best of their capabilities. And we would pretty much sit around playing chess for the ferry ride over.
Yeah, Turkmenistan was one of the strangest countries, definitely the strangest country we went to on the trip. It's a dictatorship. It is very, very hard to get a visa to go to Turkmenistan. We were only able to get a visa because of the connection with the company who runs the actual trip. And we got a 5-day transit visa, so it's not any kind of tourist visa. We've got a specific route through the country that we had to follow, entry point, exit point. We couldn't deviate from at all. So we got there, and the people were very nice. First place we stopped, and we got to the capital, Ashgabat, and the entire city is white marble. It's Guinness record is what the dictator wanted. It's a whole city of white marble. Only white cars are allowed. There's police absolutely everywhere. The whole country, the whole city has a 11 p.m. curfew to 6 a.m. No one can be outside during the night. So it was just a crazy culture shock for us. And also, the official exchange rate for Turkmen money to US dollars is 3-to-1 if you go to a bank or an ATM, but the actual conversion rate is 17-to-1. So we had to go to like markets and go to stores, and you ask them, do you take US? Will you switch US? And they're super, they all tell you about secret police. They're like secret police, and they take you into a back, and they're really, really worried about it, but they're all pretty much willing to exchange money.
In that week stretch, so you guys are stuck at the port for a few days, you're in a full-on rash, and then you go to this dictatorship type country. Mentally, what was that like? Were you guys having any anxiety attacks that you were going to get stuck somewhere? Was it super eerie in Turkmenistan? Like, what was that?
The car actually also started dying in Turkmenistan.
Oh, great.
And it's a problem we never got diagnosed for the rest of the trip, but it sometimes dies.
It was Reese telling us she needed a little bit of a breather. We just kind of sit there and rest for a couple of minutes and get the car going again, and it wouldn't happen again.
And to clarify, that's the name of your car, Patrice.
Yeah, Patrice
right? Yeah.
is our fourth member. Yeah.
So you guys were cool during all this? Or
Yeah, it's also the country where we met up with other teams. So there's a place called the Gates of Hell, the Darvaza gas crater. It's a must stop on the trip. Everyone who goes to Turkmenistan goes there. And we ran into like 4 other teams at the crater that we camped with and ended up convoying with for most of the rest of the trip. So once you're in a group with some other people, you kind of feel invincible, got a lot more confidence, and have a lot more fun.
And then you make it out of there, and then is the next stop Uzbekistan?
Yeah, so Uzbekistan was what I consider a really important country that set the tone for the rest of our trip, because we met all those other teams in the gas crater, and then the next day we all drove out. Just kind of were I don't know, I feel like we were all feeling each other out. It seemed like we were all pretty eager to be traveling with more people, but we didn't know each other, so we didn't know how long we want to stick together. And Uzbekistan was just full of surprises. We spent the first night in some random little town and just went out to dinner, all of us, had a really good time, just chatted it up. Ended up spending some time with a member of the local mob family in the area. He was extremely friendly. Pretty funny guy. Took a liking to all three of us in his own special way. We met some guy who wasn't on the rally, just a young British boy named Billy, who we met him getting into Uzbekistan. We're kind of confused as to what he was doing, just traveling by himself in Turkmenistan. He just thought it was no big deal and told us he was on his way to some rave in the middle of a dried up sea about 2 hours away from where we were going. And we were like, all right, yeah, we'll see you there. And after that, just kept going with this crew, ran into some ancient cities, some really beautiful places, maybe the most beautiful architecture of the whole trip. And it just kind of set the tone for a really positive trip the rest of the way.
And then after that, you went on the Premier Highway. Can you touch on how you ended up doing that, and what is the Premier Highway?
So the Pamir Highway is a highway that goes through the Pamir Mountains in Tajikistan. It used to be part of the route of the Silk Road, and it is also notoriously the worst roads in the world. So that's where our car took probably the biggest beating. We had a fair few bit breakdowns.
What made you take Patrice on there? Was there an alternate route you guys could have taken, or?
Yeah, originally we were going to skip the Pamirs as, worst roads in the world. We didn't really want to risk it with our gearbox being in such bad shape. But everyone else in our convoy, the guys we were traveling with, were all doing the Pamir. So last minute, applied for visas and got them the night before we needed to leave. And so we ended up going on the Pamir Highway. And it was some of the most beautiful mountains I think any of us have ever seen. It's very interesting because it's like a moonscape. It's very arid and dry, so there's not a lot of plants, but the mountains are some of the highest ones I think we've all been on. It was about 15,000 feet above sea level at the highest point.
It's one of the highest highways in the world, at the point where it runs along the Tajikistan-Afghanistan border. We followed that border for a while.
Yeah, and we also drove along the river that separates Tajikistan from Afghanistan. So that was an interesting place to be, so close to a part of the world that very few Americans without, service uniforms on go to. So that was another kind of, interesting part of the Pamir Highway for us.
And then in Kyrgyzstan, you guys encountered a snowstorm. How did Patrice deal with that?
Like a champ.
Like a champ.
Good answer.
So we were on a long drive north through Kyrgyzstan, and we were with one other car in our convoy, a Swiss guy who was traveling alone named Fausto. And his car was really having problems. It was losing oil, it was losing gearbox fluid. So we were driving with him, trying to make sure he didn't break down and get lost someplace. We were going through a mountain pass, and it starts snowing, and it starts really, really snowing. And we can see like 10 feet in front of us, and we're going down these switchback roads, down this mountain, and Fausto gets us to pull over. He flashes his lights, he's pulling over, and he tells us, thinks the car is done. He's not sure it can make it. All the lights are on, he's lost all of his oil.
I think he asked us to tow him at one point.
He did. He asked us to tow us at one point. And we're on the side of the mountain in the snow, like, man, we are not towing you down this mountain. You better get in there and hope you make it. But it's the worst place to stop. But somehow we made it down. We made it to the city. So it all turned out okay in the end.
Then, I watched a couple documentaries, and people got pulled over by foreign police quite a bit. You guys were really no different. Can you touch on if you were expecting that to happen or not, and what was that like being in these, third world type countries getting pulled over by the police?
From what we had already read about the rally, it was just kind of common, especially in those Central Asian countries, that people were just going to be, cops were going to be pulling us over, especially as foreigners, for no reason, no traffic violation at all. So we definitely expected it going in, and they weren't really ever very threatening. They just very clearly wanted some money. And sometimes we would give them money, but another solid strategy was to just stare at them with a smile and just be like, I don't know, I don't have any money. And they would just kind of keep it going for a while. We each sat in a cop car at one point or another and just kind of blankly stared at them. They would laugh, we would laugh, it'd be a little awkward. They'd take our passport, we'd try to get it back. Wouldn't work, then it'd work. It was pretty unique compared to how you deal with police here. It seems like there's a little more leeway with both parties.
What was the scariest moment with the police on the trip?
That's hard to say.
I guess it was the only time that they were like really serious with us was in Mongolia when we were trying to leave, and there was actually a problem. And Charlie was driving, and they pulled us over right when they were trying to get on the road, and they wanted us to come down to the police station to answer some questions. And we were like, we thought that they were just we thought they were just lying, and they just like wanted some money or wanted us to like go to the police station for some reason we couldn't think of. So we were just like, no, like you can ask us those questions here. And it was like an undercover cop, and eventually some police came from the station and showed us a video, and it was the one time a cop actually had a legitimate reason to stop us, because they showed us a video and it was of somebody stealing something from, we didn't see the person stealing something from a bar, but somebody had who was on the rally. And the guy in the video was one of the guys that we had been traveling with, who had already made it out of Mongolia. So before we saw the video and thought it was legitimate, I was kind of scared because they were just like more persistent that we had done something wrong than any other cop had been.
We were so jaded by that point because we'd been pulled over so many times, we didn't even assume that they might have been doing real police work.
And then, I mean, you guys are coming down the home stretch, and at one point, you accidentally drove hours in the wrong direction with no map.
Yeah, so the finish line for the rally closed September 16th, and if we were going to make it, we were going to make it on the last day. It got to a point where we really had to put miles down and really had to work to get there on time. And the last stretch of the drive is from Ulaanbaatar, the capital of Mongolia, north into Russia. And we left from Ulaanbaatar going north, and the roads were supposed to be really, really bad on this stretch. And I've been driving for about an hour and 15 minutes, and the roads are still really nice, paved, good roads. I was like thinking, wow, we should have gotten to some bad roads by now. So I pull up our map, and we're driving due west from the capital instead of due north. We just gotten turned around at some point, and we drove an hour in the wrong direction. And rather than retracing our steps, we didn't want to have to drive all the way back to the capital and lose another 2 hours. So we tried to just cut north, straight up and northeast, and we're like, well, it looks like on the map if we just make it north far enough, we can hit this road, and then we'll be able to take it back to the highway. And then it was about 5 hours of 4
We probably
hours
lost 7 hours instead of 2.
Yeah, of driving on no roads or dirt roads that ended at someone's house or just took a turn, and when started going the wrong direction, we were just backtracking, and then we were running very low on gas. The battery broke twice.
It didn't break, it just kept popping out of place.
Yeah.
And then you made it, right?
And then somehow we made it. Yeah, we eventually made it to the road, and the major highway was under construction for a 200 kilometer, 300 kilometer stretch.
Yeah, so we would just be driving on what was paved road for like a little while, and then suddenly it was just like road closed, and we just kind of stopped there for a while and like look around, and some other car would like come up behind us and just drive right off the road and start going, and we were like, all right, we'll follow them. And there were times where it was like very questionable terrain if our car was going to make it or not. One time in particular, we were following like a pretty big truck, well equipped for the roads, and it just hit a point where we were like, we can't follow it anymore. We have to go back and find another way. We would like stop in like convenience stores, and this was in the middle of the night. It was pitch black, so not only were there no roads, we couldn't see what we were driving on really at all. And we would just stop in these convenience stores in Mongolia where they didn't really speak English at all, just trying to like describe to them where we were trying to get. And the best they could do was just point in a general direction, like go that way. And yeah, that was just our last stretch to the finish line, was that for like 12 hours in the middle of the night. Pretty good.
Charlie slept pretty well.
Did he wake up for the finish line? What was the finish line like?
Eventually, yeah. We arrived at the finish line about half hour before it was done. So we really pushed it close to the end there. But it was definitely one of the most rewarding drives, pulling up into the finish line and kind of arriving and seeing the other rally teams there, and the big sign. I don't know if you've noticed it on the slideshow, but there's a picture of us on stage saying, with the big backdrop saying, you finished, or something kind of like that. So it was definitely a very special moment of the trip.
But it wasn't, so you guys finished, that's obviously exciting, but it's not like you hop on a plane to the US the next morning and you're out of Mongolia and you're back home. You guys had some work to do to get back to the States.
Yeah, we had a whole new obstacle to do for the finish line.
Yeah, so first I'll say we decided not to put our car in a train. You have the option to put your car in a train and have it shipped back to Europe, and they'll take care of it for you, but it costs 1,200 pounds. But if you drive your car back to the EU, you get your 1,200 pound deposit back, basically, if you deal with the car yourself. So we just decided we're gonna drive back across Russia to get our deposit back. We're not going to put our car in the train. And then the next day, we're checking out of the hotel, and I get all of our passports from the desk, and I give Ben his. I put mine in my pocket. Then we get in the car and we take off. And Charlie asked me for his passport about 10 minutes later, and I have no idea where his passport is. And we go back and look for it, and it is just gone. We found some documents that were in the passport on the side of the roads. We decided it was probably sat in the roof of the car, and then we drove off and lost it.
To be fair, I was able to get a new passport in Russia. Unfortunately, the nearest consulate was about 2,000 kilometers away in Novosibirsk. So we did have to drive across about half the country without a passport before I could get a new one, but it ended up okay in the end.
And you got some Tinder dates out of it.
Yeah.
It's worth 1,200 miles, maybe. So how did you three eventually get back?
We all took different routes back. We all ended up in Estonia together. I think Charlie was the first to fly out. He flew just Estonia to Warsaw, Poland, and then back here. Ben,
I flew out from Estonia back. I flew out to Berlin and then hung out there for a couple days by myself, and then took a bus to Amsterdam and met up with some other people from the rally that we had met, and hung out there for a couple days, and then flew back to the States from there.
and I was the last one with the car. I drove on my first day solo with the car, driving from Estonia to Latvia. I hit someone, another car, got in a minor accident, and broke the radiator. And I didn't have insurance in Europe anymore. It was expired. I was kind of worried about that, but no one else stopped. I got rear-ended and I hit the person in front of me, and both cars just drove away like nothing happened. So no insurance problems, but the radiator did empty out. And I eventually parked the car in Riga, the capital of Latvia, and that was as far as the car made it. And I continued on there by bus through Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland before flying out.
Henry, do you regret not throwing down the 1,200 pounds for the...
Not at all.
I think we still might get it back. We haven't gotten it back yet, but that is still a possibility.
So, I mean, this is a pretty crazy adventure. What was you three's biggest takeaway from this? I mean, do you look at the world differently now? What'd you get out of this?
I guess to put it pretty simply, foreign countries just were not nearly as intimidating or scary as I thought they would be once we got into them. The farther we got away from Western culture, the more excited people were to see us, the more welcoming they seemed to be.
Yeah, people are very friendly all around the world. It's a huge takeaway. They're also on Tinder everywhere.
Yeah, even Russia as a country you hear about, in kind of negative light, and, you have kind of this preconception going into the country that the people are going to be kind of harsh and, rude. But we really found it to be the exact opposite. Some of the warmest, welcoming people we met on the whole trip was in Russia. The most polite, courteous drivers on the trip. No one speeds. Everyone stops for pedestrians. I think there were a lot of eye-opening experiences to places that, we didn't know how to pronounce before we left. And then there was also just a lot of wrong preconceptions that we came in with that were, shattered in a lot of really great ways.
Would you guys do it again?
I would.
I would not.
If I had to go back in time and somebody was like, with what you know now, would you do it again? Yes, but I won't be doing it in the future.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I think that's a good note to open it up to questions. Let's give these guys a hand. Way in the back over there. I'll repeat the question so everyone can hear. Did you notify U.S. embassies that you were coming with an itinerary? The consensus answer is no, correct? All right. Does the Mongol Rally notify police departments in every country to notify them that the rally is coming through?
I don't think so. It's been going on for about 20 years now, so I think they just kind of know what time of year all the goofy-looking cars with stickers come through. They're pretty ready for us at this point.
That they can get money from. How much did it cost?
Well, it can vary a lot. We were lucky, actually that's a great point. We were lucky to get some amazing sponsors for the trip. We were sponsored by Rush Creek Distillery in Harvard, Illinois. Huge thank you to Rush Creek. St. Coletta of Wisconsin.
And Book Club.
Book Club. Yeah, some teams are completely sponsored and get a bunch of help and a bunch of money. Some teams, also it depends if you camp a lot, if you stay in places. I don't know if we have a total tally.
All right, the trip was priceless.
Trip.
Good. All right. Tom, how do you plan on memorializing this journey?
There's a great podcast we're going to be on.
That's right. This will live on forever. People can look up the Go Getters podcast and leave 5-star reviews. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Going into the yurt in Mongolia.
Well, one of the cool things about, we were driving, I got to give Charlie all credit for this. We were driving and we stopped and there was a handful of yurts and there was camels outside and there were some signs that we couldn't read, but they had signs. And because they had signs and one of the camels had a saddle on, Charlie was like, I think we can ride camels there. I was like, are you sure we could just roll up to someone's house and say, can we ride your camels? He was like, yeah, let's go for it. And we pulled up, and we went up to him, we kind of like waved, made our presence known. He sort of ignored us for the first few minutes because he was milking a camel. And then he went into the house and he came back out, and he threw saddles on a couple camels, and we gave him some cash, and he took us for a ride. So
we rode for about 45 minutes on the camels, and that was, a very wonderful experience. These camels are actually, I think it's bacterian camels. Bacterian, and so they have 2 humps, which is only makes up about 5% of the camel population as a whole has 2 humps. So that was, unique in a Mongolian kind of way. And then so we got off the camels and we were getting ready to go, and the guy, as he didn't speak English, gestured to us that we should come inside his yurt. And so we did, and he offered us tea. The camel milk he had just milked, he gave us fresh camel milk tea, as well as some wonderful, we're not quite sure what was in the dumplings, but they were very delicious. A few theories of horse meat and tripe, but you never are quite sure. But it was some of the best food we had on the trip, honestly. And it's really fun to be in the yurt. That's like a truly Mongolian experience.
Dr. Scott, how did you pick your vehicle, Patrice?
There's like a closed Facebook group every year for like that year's Mongol Rally, and there's a guy who did it a couple of years ago who's a mechanic who they put on the Facebook page every year, and he just finds cars that are Mongol Rally qualified and just posts them, and we just hopped on one as soon as it seemed halfway decent.
He lives in the UK, and in Europe, for whatever reason, it's easy to register a car as a non-resident, non-citizen in the UK compared to all of Europe. So most people from other countries get UK cars.
So, Mr. Bentley, are you looking to visit? Mr. Bentley was asking about weed and alcohol in these countries. What are their views?
Alcohol was viewed very positively in most of the countries, and marijuana was pretty non-existent, I think. Yeah.
Well, we did drive through a fair amount of Muslim countries, starting from Turkey and going pretty much until Western Mongolia. A lot of the people were Muslim, but because of the Soviet occupation for most of the 20th century, a lot of these cultures have been inoculated with a lot of alcohol, specifically vodka. And so there was still some drinking to be found, but it was not as common as it would be here for the most part. In Georgia, you can say that. Yeah. Oh, in Georgia, there was a special liquor that they have there called cha-cha, which is somewhere between 50 to 70% alcohol. It's some sort of brandy. It's distilled grape juice, and it's very tasty.
All right, I think we got time for 2 more, and then I'm sure these guys will hang around after in the back over there. Were there any women participating in the rally?
There are some women participating in the rally. I would say, in general, it's mostly guys. But there are definitely teams of all female or a couple mixed teams of 2 and 2.
I think this year was the highest amount of female contestants in the rally, actually.
We'll go back there.
About 300 teams.
Yeah, I think like
Around
320.
1,000 people were doing it.
Yeah.
About 240 finished.
All right, let's give these guys a hand. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you, gentlemen. Great story. It gives us some hope. Maybe people around the world are not as different as we think they are. So this is also the time of the program, gentlemen, when we talk about polio. Rotary has a commitment to polio. We're this close to eradicating polio throughout the world. There was just one type of wild polio left in the world, and the WHO just recently commended Rotary and Rotary International's long-term effort to eradicate it. We're going to make a donation in your names to thank you for your presentation today to buy 50 doses of the vaccine to get us that much closer to eliminating polio throughout the world, including all those stands in Russia and everywhere else. So thank you very much.